That's right. Spelled with two N's, both of us.
Nice. All right, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to Marian University, where we are blessed to have been granted a mission in 1936 from the Congregation of Sisters of St. Agnes. And in these last 89, we're going to be celebrating our beginning of our 90th year on September 8th. So big round of applause. We're getting to 90 years. And there's no better way to do that than to take one of our own, an academic and a personal superstar from across the world, to come here and help us learn what it means more about our charism, about love, and about the Catholic faith and how we can express it. So welcome, Sister Dianne, and to give you a little bit more information about Sister Dianne, I'm very excited to have Dianne Vadney, our leader of our campus ministry. So let's give it up for Dianne Vadney.
So one of the sisters told me a story that back in the day when decisions were being made, the superior general, the general superior, invited you to study scripture and suggested that.
Well, different verb.
Yes.
Told me.
Was it a stronger verb?
Told me.
Told her. I think that's probably a more accurate version. And told her that she would go and study scripture. And so she did, and study it she did. So listen to this biography. I think by the end of the talk, you'll have learned quite a lot as the fruit from her studies. So Sister Dianne received her Ph.D. from the Divinity School of St. Louis University and has received honorary doctoral degrees from the Jesuit School of Theology of Santa Clara University in California, our own Marian University, and the Catholic University of Australia, Melbourne, Victoria. She's also served as president of the Catholic Biblical Association of America. She's been active in Chicago Catholic Jewish Scholar Dialogue, has been on numerous editorial boards, and has taught and lectured in the United States, South Africa, Namibia, Trinidad, England, Ireland, Philippines, Thailand, Mexico, Nicaragua, Rome, Australia, and New Zealand. And one more, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get the pronunciation right. Kiribati?
Kiribati.
Kiribati. So quite extensive, and here she is in Fond du Lac, down the street, and gracing us with some scriptural and human information and reflection tonight. So as you probably heard, she had Pope Leo XIV as a student when she was a professor down at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. That's right. Do I understand that you communicated with him even before the conclave?
Oh, yes.
Yes, and he responded back. Then Bob.
That's Bob.
Now Pope Leo XIV. And it is a joy to welcome you to Marian University and to offer this series on Catholic intellectual tradition. The goal of the committee was to take these principles, which sound intimidating sometimes, and to just make them accessible. And so we are grateful and we are thrilled to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. I hope my voice usually travels quite well, and I hope it's on loud enough. Otherwise, my assistants up in higher heaven will take care of that. I received from Donna Ennis a copy of the mission guide, which I'm sure all students at Marian have read carefully. It is in this mission guide that we find the 9 different items of the Catholic intellectual tradition. Now, they are all listed in I don't know if it's a certain order, but I have rearranged the order. What I want to do today is spend a little bit of time with you with one that is called Dignity of the Human Person. And I have decided that looking at the particular theme in this intellectual tradition, to try to discover from a biblical point of view, how would I address it from the biblical point of view? One thing you've got to remember, theology always changes. Theology that does not change is simply religious history. Theology always changes. Now, many people don't realize that. So when theology changes, or, of course, it doesn't change by itself, when someone changes theology, people get very excited. Something else we have to remember, that theology is articulated usually in the language of the contemporary people. Philosophy is very significant in Western civilization within which we all are. Consequently, we articulate our theology philosophically. But in the Bible, it is not philosophical. And in the Bible, it is not historical. Even though it sounds like an historical event, chances are it's an interpreted event that has some theological or historical data. So biblical is not historical, it's not philosophical, it's metaphor. And that's what I want to share with you this afternoon. One metaphor. Now, metaphor, we know, is a figure of speech. And the metaphor I want to talk about is image of God. And I want you to think about that. What does that mean? What is an image of God? When we talk about it all the time, what are we talking about? Again, it's a metaphor, which means it stands for something else. And a good metaphor stands for a lot of other things, a lot of other possibilities for interpretation. Now, when I say image of God, chances are many, if maybe most of you, know of an image of God. You just don't know you know it. The golden calf. In Exodus and on into other stories, but primarily in Exodus, this is the story that we find in Exodus. Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 Commandments. The people are down at the foot of the mountain waiting. Now, the way the story is told, it sounds incredible that the people at the foot of the mountain get tired of waiting. Moses, my God, is in dialogue with God, getting the 10 Commandments, and they get tired of waiting. So they turn to Aaron, and they say to him, "Make us an image of God that we have something to worship." Now, put that aside for just a moment. The God that we worship is imageless. There is no concrete representation of the God that you and I worship if we are Christians or Jewish or if we are Muslim. It is an imageless God, which means you cannot build a symbol of God that really captures the essence of God. This is what these people are asking for. So as the story goes on, Aaron collects all of the gold that the people had carried with them out of Egypt. They are now in the wilderness. And they get all the gold, and the text says, Aaron threw the gold in the fire, and out came the image of a calf. The golden calf is the image of God that Aaron created. Now, an image or a representation or a symbol of something. You got a symbol which represents the school. Do you know what that symbol means? You know what that image means? Somehow or other, it is supposed to capture a characteristic of the school. Sabers. So how does that capture a characteristic of Marian? You know, and to the extent that you are really devoted to this institution, you'll know all about that image. That's an image. It's not an image of God. It's an image of the school. Actually, it's an image of athletes of the school. It's a symbol that captures something. So what would a golden calf, what characteristics would a golden calf capture? Two are very obvious ones. One of them, a calf. It's not a bull. A bull represents mature strength. A calf represents the promise of mature strength. And in many cultures in the ancient world, it was valued more than the bull. So in a certain sense, there's a value there. And of course, it's made of gold, a precious stone. So what they're saying by creating this image, this representation of their God, did they worship a bull? Of course not. Did they worship a calf? Of course not. Or maybe, and that's the problem. But I'll get to that in just a moment. But let's think about it as an image. It's telling us that our God is precious, as precious of gold or more precious than gold. And our God is great promise, as much promise as a young calf, but more promise than a young calf. And always male. And not because male is better than female, but male are dispensable. If you slaughter a female animal, you are also slaughtering the next generation. All you need is one rooster in the hen house, because of and in a certain sense, that's very much the truth. And because in a certain sense they are dispensable, they're precious. Now that's what an image of God is. And that's what Aaron made for the people. Now Moses comes down from the mountain, sees what is going on. He has just been in dialogue with God, who has given commandments, given a list of, if you want to be my people, this is what I expect of you. We all know what that is like. If you want to belong to this sorority, this is what we expect of you. If you want to belong to this congregation, this is what we expect of you. If you want to be my people, my special people, this is what I expect of you. And they had agreed to be his special people. And they had agreed to obey the law that they would receive. And here they are, violating it, doing the worst thing, turning their back on their God, who cannot be imaged. The God of Israel cannot be imaged. And the reason is because it is so easy to move from giving respect to an image to thinking that the image is really the God. That's a very, very important thing to remember, friends. Image of God is not the God. It's a representation. It's a symbolic representation. I keep beating that as if I'm beating a dead horse, because that is a very important issue for you and me today to realize when we talk about image of God. So Moses comes down furious, and God, of course, is furious. Now, I always say any self-respecting God in the ancient Near Eastern world would have struck those people dead. But God didn't. Instead, as we find in Exodus 34, chapter 34, verse 6, the Lord passed by before them and proclaimed, the Lord, the Lord. A little aside, I don't know what kind of background, biblical background you have, but Christians and Jews do not normally pronounce the personal name of the God of Israel, which is also the God of Christianity, Yahweh. We don't know, we used to write it out, but we don't even write it out anymore. So in Christian translations, with the exception of some evangelicals, and I don't know which ones, But some evangelical churches who print their own Bibles have no problem with it, but most do, and most mainline Christians, and of course Jews, will not write that name out. Instead, they will put the word, what we Christians do, and not just Catholics, we write the word Lord in small caps. So if you ever open the Bible and you see the word Lord in small caps, the Hebrew word behind that is the personal name of God. There is a word, Adonai, that is translated Lord. And that can either be with a capital L and small O-R-D, which then behind that usually is translated, when you have that Hebrew, it's usually translated God. Or if it's all small letters, then it simply means boss. So the word can be used in 3 different ways. Now, in very traditional societies, people are jealous about preserving the secrecy of their name. I once had a student of an African tribe who had 5 names. His first name that everybody knew was his public name. Everybody knew his public name. Second was his family tribe name, and only the tribe could use that name. Third was his intimate family, and only the intimate family could use that name. Fourth was the name that he used as he stood before his God. And the 5th one was his very intimate, only his most intimate friends knew his name. We are not like that, we in this culture. You can go into a restaurant, I'm Debbie, I'll be your waitress. I mean, people give out their names. A name in traditional society, a name contained part of the essence of the individual. I remember when I was in 4th grade, we had a cedar chest in the attic. And going through the cedar chest, I found a little packet of white envelopes tied together with a blue ribbon. They were the notes that my father wrote to my mother before they got married. And I, of course, read them all. So I knew my father's pet name for my mother. I never heard him use it, but I knew it. So I went downstairs and I showed my mother what I had found in the cedar chest. She never said a word. She just looked at me and took the envelopes, and I never saw them again. And I knew something I had no right to know. Once in a while, we have experiences like that with names. Now, I was fortunate to teach in Chicago when Bob Prevost was a student. And now Bob Prevost is Leo the 14th. So I had him in class. I want to tell you, I always called him Bob. I would never call him Bob now. I would call him Leo. There are certain people, I mean, you don't go up to the Pope and say, "How you doing, Bob?" unless you're his brother, but not his teacher. Nor would I go up to the president. Nor would any of us go up to certain people. We have no right to call them by certain names, by their given name, by a personal name. So in our society, we don't have much of this, but we have some of it. Some of it. We disclose our intimate things, our intimate knowledge, our intimate desires, our intimate names to the people with whom we are intimate, to our best friends. Sometimes we even create names, secret names, and not just for 4th graders, secret names for each other if we are close to someone. But generally speaking, we're free with other people's names. That's important to know, because when God gives God's name, and it says you can use this, you will know me by this name, that is very significant. Because when you know the secret name of someone, the intimate name, you have a certain amount of power. There aren't too many of you who can say, I had the Pope in school. Well, I can. I mean, and you get that kind of, you know, I'm special because I know this particular name. And sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not. All right, this is what God says as the people, as God and Moses had come down the mountain. I'm going to use the Hebrew, even though it's not in the text here. Yahweh, Yahweh. In other words, these people have turned against God, have been worshiping a symbol of another God. And God gives them God's special name. God holds no anger. God does not hold anything against us. That is at the heart of our faith. God does not hold anything against us. That is not to say we can do anything. Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for the 1,000th generation. That's what God says after they have violated their fidelity, their commitment, their relationship with God. Now, they have been in covenant with God. I moved from Genesis to Exodus. I want to go back to Genesis because I'm really talking about image of God. What we find about, I'll come back to the Exodus passage in a moment. What we find in the Genesis creation narrative, in the first one, not the second one, the first one, what we find is a very interesting, kind of creation. And when God creates, he gives them a command. The text says command, tells them, increase, multiply, and fill your habitat. The text says, he says to the fish in the sea, increase and multiply and fill the sea. To the animals on the earth, increase and multiply and fill your habitat, which is the earth. And to the birds, increase and multiply and fill the air. You find that in Genesis 1. But when it comes to the creation of human beings, increase, multiply, and fill the earth, and there are two more verbs, subdue and have dominion. Subdue and have dominion. Now think, who functions like that? Who subdues and has dominion? To have dominion means you've got certain control over. Most likely, this story comes from the people who subdue and have dominion, the monarchy. In the ancient world, that would be the monarchy. But we know what increase, multiply, fill the earth means. What does subdue and have dominion mean? That means they got power. Subdue, that's a very harsh word. Wherever that Hebrew word is found in the Old Testament, it means something harsh. Dominion can be harsh, but it also can be to have dominion over, as a gardener has dominion over. And that's not harsh. But subdue is a harsh word. Now, they are to subdue and have dominion. But here, it's important to remember, they are image of God. Image of God. They represent God. We all know what happens when we subdue and have dominion with absolutely no care for what we are subduing and what we have dominion over. We have garbaged our world, claiming we are created by God, and God gave us the right to have power over the rest of the natural world. Many people think that. Many people were taught that. That is a misreading. That's reading Genesis 1 all by itself. There's another part. It's in Genesis 3 that talks about image of God. Another part. But clearly, as image of God, we have a certain amount of, this is what the text says. Remember, it's not history. It's a story. And it may reflect experience that we have dominion over. We have a certain amount of jurisdiction over the natural world. Beavers might be able to make dams, but they can't write poetry. Beavers can make dams, but beavers cannot fly. Human beings can make dams, they can fly, they can write poetry. We've got a certain amount of jurisdiction over the natural world. Years ago, several years ago, I don't know if you ever saw the movie, the television program, The A-Team. But the Mr. T, a man who was always wearing gold jewelry, he was in that particular program. I use him as an example because he lived north of Chicago. He lived in a suburb north of Chicago, a very wealthy suburb. And he bought a place where there was a mansion, and he wanted to tear the mansion down and build a bigger one. But before he did that, he cut down most of the trees on the property. Now, where he was living was up in the cliff, and right down from the cliff is Lake Michigan. You cut the trees down. What's holding the ground up there are the roots of the trees. Not only for his property, but for the neighbor's property as well. And the neighbors were up in arms that he cut the trees down. And he said, it's my land, I can do what I want. And he was right. He could do what he wanted because it was his land. But he had no sense of what he was doing to the neighbors. So when we have a certain amount of jurisdiction, how do we exercise that? How do we exercise that? Keep that question in mind. I want to jump, and it sounds like I'm jumping. I want to jump from Genesis 1 to Genesis 3. Genesis 3 is the story of the sin, where the serpent tempts the woman. And what was the sin? Don't say disobedience, because God said to them, there are 2 trees in the garden. You can eat from one tree, but you can't eat from the other. And the man and the woman wanted to eat from both of those trees. One of them was the tree of life, another symbol, and the other one was the tree of knowledge, another symbol. So we're talking about symbols, we're talking about metaphors. In the ancient world, the chief God is the one who had control over life and knowledge. That was the chief God. I mean, if you were an important God and you could not control life, you're not very important. And if you didn't know everything, you're not very important. So the chief God had control over life and knowledge. Those are the 2 trees in the garden. And the man and the woman, human beings are told, you can have one, but you can't have both. Because if you eat from both, then you will be a god. That's what Genesis 3 says. The woman is, the serpent says, why did God say you could not eat of any of the trees in the garden? And that's not what God said, but that's what the serpent said. But the woman said, God did not say we cannot eat of any tree in the garden. We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said you shall not eat of the tree that is in the middle of the garden. And the serpent said, you will not die. Listen to this, because this is the temptation. You will not die because you are disobedient. For God knows that when you eat of the second tree, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. That is the sin, wanting to be gods. It's called original sin not because it's the first sin. It's called original sin because it is the foundation of human sinfulness. You and I, all of us, are not satisfied being image of God. We want to be God. Now, you may not use that language. Again, I remember when I was a kid, the language we used was, "Who died and left you, boss?" You know what that means. And you know people like that. And you are someone like that, as I am. My way is the best way. I'm the one in charge here. And if you don't know that, I'll show you. There is the desire in human beings to be in charge of everything. And I don't want to get in any way involved in politics. That's what we're facing. You and I. That's what we face. We are not satisfied to be an image of God. We want to be God's. What does it mean to be an image of God? To be an image of God means we represent God. Think deeply into yourselves, friends. What about you represents God? And don't tell me you got a soul. I'm not saying I don't believe in that. That's not what I'm talking about. What do you do that represents God? Are you kind? That represents God. God is kind. God is unselfish. Whether you want to talk about God from the Old Testament point of view or Jesus, who is the example for us of what it means to be a human being. Kind, unselfish, generous. What do they say about you? What do you manifest to the world? How have you and how have I made the world within which we live better? Do we manifest gold, but gold in our action, not in what we're painted with? What do we represent? Honesty, unselfishness, or greed, vindictiveness, pettiness? Some of us are so petty. And pettiness is not a characteristic of just women, of old ladies. It's a characteristic of young men as well. I taught in a seminary for 45 years. I saw it. And they saw it in me as well. That's what it means to be an image of God. That wherever I am, wherever we are, people see goodness. People see dedication. People see forgiveness. People don't see name-calling, petty name-calling. People say understanding. When someone makes a mistake and says, "I'm sorry," they see understanding. Every single one of us has been violated against by someone. You can't have lived very long without being the victim of somebody else's limited human beings. If all it is, a sibling who takes advantage of you, or a parent who doesn't love you enough, or doesn't love you at all. How forgiving are you? And when I say you, are we? Look into yourself. This is what we're talking about when we talk about human dignity. Not just giving us rights, that's all important. But I am an image of God. You are an image of God. What do we project to the world? Just by wearing a shirt that says Marian University and people know it's Catholic? Wait, you'll use that shirt for something else soon. That's what image of God is. That's what human dignity is. Let me read what the Catholic intellectual tradition says about the dignity of the human person. The CIT exemplifies an ethical tradition that affirms the intrinsic value of each human being as created in the image of God. But again, image is a metaphor. What does that mean? We use the language all the time. And you got to see an image. So don't say image of God is the human soul. You see what soul or the emotion produces. That is what we'll see. The person's second birth obligates us to conditions consistent with unity. Now, that illustration, I'm just definition. I'm trying to point of view, says what we are responsible for doing. My question is, what are you doing? That's what we're responsible for. Shows it to you don't see and my way of being is doing. But that's how the image of God will operate. Because God holds no grudges. And God holds no grudges. We are image of God. And we hold no grudges. Consistent with human dignity and reject those conditions that threaten intrinsic human value. Example, there are homeless people in this city. What have you done? What have I done that exacerbates that? Have I done anything that continues homelessness? Have I avoided doing something that addresses homelessness? I mean, look around. The world needs saving. Who do you suppose is going to do it? Those of us who recognize that we are image of God. That's what image of God means. Think again of yourself. Why are you at this institution? What do you want to do with your life? How are you going to make a difference? And I suppose you think it's easy for none to say, it's got to be something other than making a lot of money. But that desire to be successful, that desire to make money, is not a lay temptation. It's a temptation of all people, the desire to be successful. Being successful is extraordinarily seductive. Whether that being successful as a sports person, and that is not to say we shouldn't want to be successful, but why? To make a difference in the world. The Capuchins, I don't know if you know much about the Capuchins that are around here, but they are in the process of working for the canonization of one of their own. In fact, on the weekend, there was a celebration up at Calvary for blessing a building, a dorm that was that was named after this Capuchin, a lay priest. He was ordained simplex. Simplex means he was not considered smart enough to be able to hear confessions. They don't do that anymore, but they did with his time. This man is considered a saint. What did he do that was so spectacular? He answered the door and the telephone. He was a porter. So it's not what he did, it's how he did it. To hold a door open, that's simple. That's something every single one of us could very easily do several times a day. To hold a door open and smile instead of slamming it in somebody's face. That's what it means to be an image of God. So again, think about your life right now, not just what you want your life to be. Think of the people in your experience, in your life, in your family, in your classes, who need to be encouraged, who need to be forgiven. Sometimes we wait too long to forgive people and our chance is gone. That's what it means to be an image of God. Make the world within which you live, of which you are a part, make it better for your having been part of it. Now, that's not corny piety. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, to go up to somebody and say, I should never have said that to you, I'm sorry. Sometimes that's hard to do. But that means you are manifesting to the world the goodness and forgiveness of God. Where do you suppose you got it, if you have it? The good traits that you have, the unselfishness that you already are, the helpfulness that you are, where did it come from? What box of cereal did you find it in? That comes from what God has made. We are to be God's image, not the image of selfishness, not the image, of brute power. I can't say it enough, but if I say it much more, you might not hear it. You have such great potential, and not because you're young, because I have great potential as well. We all have great potential. And only we really know, only we know what it is within us that can make a difference, and what it is within us that prevents us from making that difference. We know, you're old enough, as I am old enough, to know what prevents us from making a difference in the world, not just in your life, but in the world. So let me read that once more. The Catholic intellectual tradition exemplifies an ethical tradition that affirms the intrinsic value of each human being as created in the image of God. The person's sacred worth obligates us to promote conditions consistent with human dignity and rejects those conditions that threaten intrinsic human value. That's what the creation narrative is talking about when it talks about increase, multiply, fill the earth, subdue, and have dominion. We all have little places where we are the ones responsible. And then we go into Genesis 1, and remember, deep down within us is the desire to be in charge, but to be in charge and have no one tell us what to do, that we instead tell them what to do. I can do it, it's my own land. You can't tell me, it's my land, I bought it. And the laws allowed it, but not human dignity, not human goodness allowed that. So that's Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Go back to the Exodus passage. To use another image or another metaphor, the covenant metaphor. Covenant is it's not a word that's part of our vocabulary except in law. I think they still use that word in law, that you make a covenant with the land. But covenant really is like a deal, make a contract with somebody. And when you enter into a contract with, it's a legal agreement. You enter into a contract and the two partners agree on the conditions of the contract. That's what a covenant is. And in the Bible, when you get into theology and talk about contract, it's a contract usually that God makes with the people. It's not a contract that the people make with God. It's that God makes the contract with the people. God is the one who initiates. God is the one who calls us, who has called us into being. God is the one who makes us images of God. And we respond. It's not that God responds to us. It's that we respond to God. And so God has entered into a covenant with the Israelites. And God entered into a covenant through Jesus with the Christians. And everyone in baptism, it's like God enter into a covenant with that particular person. And there's a special bond. And the language of covenant is very touching language. We read that in the prophets. We read in Isaiah, I have called you by name. There it is again, being called by name. It's intimacy. I have called you by name. You are mine. That's God speaking to a human being. There's not a person in this room who would not want another human being say that to them. I have called you by name. You are mine. That is so touching, but it's not a human being who says it. It's God who says it to us. In Jeremiah, I have loved you with an everlasting love. That's God speaking to us. That's the image of God. That's the image of God. I shouldn't have used that because that is that's the way God appears in the Gospels. And we are the image and must be the image of that. A loving, compassionate, attending God. And we are the images. And imagine what the headlines will be if there would be some kind of significant, stupendous transformation of Fond du Lac because of you. And it could be. All we have to do is to be faithful to what we are as image of God. All right, that's enough. Now, I think there can be questions. I don't have them. Oh, you got a microphone.
I got us.
There's a hand over there.
Here you go. And just if you want to just tell your name and kind of your role here, Grayson.
Okay, hi, my name is Grayson, and my role here, I'm a student, and I play volleyball. My question is, how does one truly forgive?
I didn't hear that. Say it again.
How does one truly forgive?
First of all, that's an excellent question. First of all, why, I would ask, why do you want to forgive?
Something happened in my family, and I know that's just how he is, which is why I want to forgive him, but sometimes I feel like my anger kind of gets the best of me, and I don't know if I have forgiven him for that.
I would say the very fact that you're asking how to do it indicates that it is in you. What you got to do is get, here I'm giving advice, and I mean I can answer questions, but I'm in no position to give you advice, but I'm going to.
Thank you.
It would seem to me the very fact that it bothers you, that you want to know how to do it, is an indication that you do want to do it. Then what's sometimes very difficult is to give people the benefit of the doubt. Either they didn't know how much they hurt you, or they didn't care at that moment, and they could be feeling guilty as well. The easy thing to say, and I mean this sincerely, swallow your anger and say, I'm sorry. Maybe they don't give a damn. Maybe they don't care whether you're, whether you're sorry or not, but you took the step. That's a heroic act, I think.
Thank
But
you.
don't lose that desire. Oh, yeah, we got several of them.
All right, right over here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Asher. I'm a student here as well. I play golf. Yes.
Everybody's got Jewish names.
You mentioned very early on in your presentation that theology is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
I find theology very fascinating, studying the works of St. Thomas Aquinas and other saints who have been incredibly influential in our
Hold
modern
it up a little bit closer to
Sorry.
your mouth. That's it.
in our modern understanding
Right.
of theology.
Right.
How do we reconcile creating new theology? How do we link that in to the teachings of Christ and the teachings of the Old Testament? How do we link it all together to fully shape our understanding of God?
Theologians will say that it is the contemporary context that really leads in the question that you asked, in the collaboration of the religious tradition, whether that be biblical or theological or political or social, the contemporary situation. You are not to understand theology as Thomas Aquinas did, because he doesn't know what you live in, and you don't know what he lived in. So it's the need of the present moment that calls us to look at what our religious tradition says about, let's say, whether it be forgiveness, whether it be honesty, whether it be the role of women in society. That's a theological issue as well. You can't go to somebody like Augustine, where women did not have the kinds of recognition, the dignity of women was not recognized at the time of Augustine, one of the greatest theologians in the Catholic tradition. So you can't understand the role of women in Augustine and apply that today. It's the role of women today, whether that be women or gay or that kind of an issue. You know, the whole question about sexuality, we're struggling with it in a way in this era that my parents didn't struggle with. And that's not 100 years ago. So it's the times right now, which means that you've got to know what's good for us today. And good, not simply what do we want, but what's good for us today. Then you ask the question, what does Aquinas have to say about that? Or does Aquinas have anything to say about that? Or does Bonaventure have something to say about that? But it's what do we need today? And unfortunately, sometimes if all we do is continue to spin philosophically magnificent theology, then it's a beautiful tapestry. And we can light a vigil light and then go out and, fight the battles of the world. But that's how you do theology, and that's how it changes. Whoever's going to say. Anyone else? Oh, there's two up here.
We got Grace and follow-up.
How was Bob in class?
He was a good student. That's all I'm able to say. Kay, did you want to say something? Oh.
I guess I'll have one since we're so blessed to have you here. And
Yeah.
So I was reading a book and doing some research on just on life in general, and I think Tolstoy wrote something, because I always used to say, I'm not afraid to die, I'm good to go, just lead my good life. And Tolstoy, I had read that said, live your life not in a way where you're never afraid to die, but live your life in a way that if anybody dies, you don't have regret. So instead of living your life like I have no regrets, I can die, but if I live my life in a way so that if somebody dies, I'll miss them, but I don't have regret. That was something that really, as you were talking, it kind of resonated with me a little more.
Yeah, it's very difficult. We all carry some of that stuff, and we all hope there's another chance. Anyone else? Yes.
So I do have a question now that you said you have a question. So you speak about the Old Testament, and you speak about the image of God, and you speak about honesty and integrity and kindness. So explain all that vengefulness of God that comes out in the Old Testament.
All right, excellent. The question, of course, is, I've spoken about the goodness of God and the love of God and so on, but what about all the vengefulness that comes out? The question is, who's telling the story? You got to remember that this is how Israel understood their relationship with God. I was waiting for that question to come. This is how Israel understood, and not only Israel. I am sure that there are people in this room who really feel when anything good happens, God has blessed them. And if anything bad happens, then they wonder, what have I done to deserve this? You don't even have to be a religious believer to say, what have I done to deserve this? People actually think that everything that happens in life is a consequence of something that they have done. And if they've done something good, they should be rewarded. They should be happy. And they define what happiness is. And if they've done something not good, they hope to God nobody knows. But if anything, then they say, that this is God punishing. I don't understand God that way. Granted, it is in the tradition, just as the goodness of God is in the tradition. But it's the question that theology calls it the question mark of evil in the world. How do we define? How do we explain evil in the world? How do you explain why do good? What was the name of the book? Why does bad things happen to good people? Because we would like to live in a world where retribution means the good is rewarded, the evil is punished. And we normally turn it upside down and judge. If I'm happy, it's because I've been good. If I'm not happy, it's because I've been bad, but I haven't been bad, so who's responsible for my unhappiness? That's the way the thinking goes. And you don't have to be taught that. We learn that we expect when we do the right thing. Our parents taught us that. There's nothing wrong with that, to reward good behavior. That's how you teach children. That's how you teach puppies as well. You give them a bone, you give them a pat on the head, and that's how we learn how the appropriate behavior. The question is when it doesn't seem to fit according to our standards. Okay, so that's general, it's not just Israel. So how then would Israel talk about, Israel was ancient Israel was an extraordinarily insignificant nation in the ancient Near Eastern world. It had to deal with Egypt, which was a superpower, Babylon, which was a superpower, Assyria, which was a superpower. It was a nothing nation. Nothing nation. Ogden Nash once said, "How odd of God to choose the Jews." Because they were a nothing nation. And yet, somehow or other, they got this insight that retribution, somehow or other, retribution doesn't always fit. There is a God who loves us. And now, the text doesn't say this, but this is what the text means. Just as parents sometimes say, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. Parents punish Make the child learn the lesson. That's how Israel spoke about God teaching his people, because the punishment, the anger, never lasted forever. Never. And the people were never destroyed. That's what I said before, that any self-respecting ancient Near Eastern God would have struck those people dead. That's how the gods operated, but not the God of Israel. The big question in my mind has always been, how did those people ever come to that insight? Because they were not known for their intellectual prowess, ancient Israel. That would go to the superpowers, nor their artistic ability, the hanging gardens of Lebanon, not of Tel Aviv. You know, so it was remarkable that that's the people, except that, you know how Israel interpreted that. God chose us so that everybody would know that any good we do comes from God. In the ancient Near Eastern world, most in their literature, most gods had clay feet. The heroes were always human, or at least half human. In ancient Israel, the hero was always God. Never the king, never the prophet. The hero was always God. Human beings had clay feet. How did they make that change? So the whole question about why do we find that in the Bible? Because that's the way Israel understood that God was teaching them a lesson, just like parents punish children. Now, you can understand that, but it's not very comforting when you're going through the suffering, not the punishment, because you know it's not punishment. So that's the best I can do with that, because there is no satisfying answer when we talk about what appears to be innocent suffering. What we have to do is get rid of that whole notion of retribution, which we can't, because it's an operative theory, and it's a good theory. It just doesn't work all the time. Okay. Anyone else?
Was there somebody? All right, well, we are right at the hour.
The time. Okay.
Right at the hour. So just really quickly, I want to thank Sister Dianne. Let's hear a big round of applause. And this was just the first one. Wait till we see how many people come. So everybody's challenge is bring a friend next time. Bring a friend next time so that we can leave here smarter than when we came and treat the world better. Thank you so much, Sister Dianne. Appreciate it.
And on that note, I just want to, thank you. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause first. And on that note, I did want to invite everybody back on September 23rd is the next talk, and she will be speaking on appreciation for creation and interconnectedness. And so it's an important topic, one that I'm sure we will walk out of the room equally enlightened. So please return again on Tuesday, September 23rd, and thank you so much, Sister, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
I had a question, but
And as we're leaving, just really quick shout out, Sister Donna. Thank you so much for taking this idea, taking it to Sister Dianne, and making it what it is. You did a great job. Thank you for helping facilitate that.
I wanted to follow up with Grayson about forgiveness. Is that connected to the idea like we're supposed to